Welcome to the One Another podcast, where we explore the beauty of difference and the necessity of connection. I'm Sarah, your host, and this is episode 2. A quick note before we get started. We struggled to get our audio equipment to cooperate on this recording, and then we experienced a software glitch, so we're really grateful it's here at all, but you may notice a scratchy quality to the recording. Thanks for your patience as we work out the kinks. So, last week we started by unpacking our title by doing something that perfectly reflects the heart of this podcast. Rather than beginning with the concept of one or the concept of other, we started right in the middle. We began with and, which is the balance point, the center. If you look at the artwork for this podcast, you'll see the symbolism of two overlapping circles. The and symbol is in the place where the two circles overlap. It's the space where both things are true, or perhaps where two perspectives meet and find common ground. The unique shape that is made here also forms the shape of an eye. I invite you to contemplate this image alongside us and see what significance it has for you. So here we are, friends. I'm so happy to have both of you here with me. Cindy and Andrea are here again.
Hello.
Good morning.
So this is our take 2 of this episode. We've had some technical challenges, and from the recommendation of both of you, I think I'm just going to start with my own desire. I guess what I feel passionate about is, it seems to me that the most beautiful way to live would be to live with the awareness that we are one, mystically, spiritually, or even just the idea that we're all humans or we all share this planet, right? Mm-hmm. And to recognize that our unique self, the ego even, our personality is important as well. What would it be like if we knew that we were one and other, if we knew that we were connected to everyone and everything, and we recognize the beauty of our distinct, separate personalities and selves. So yeah, let's dive into these ideas of oneness. I'm going to just read a couple of quotes from people that have inspired me. One of the quotes I wanted to start with is a quote by Rumi. Rumi is a mystic from the Islamic tradition. Any of the mystics from any of the faiths, I feel, tend to have this perspective of oneness. Mm-hmm. So Rumi, one of his famous quotes is, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." And I that one will get me, ruminating and thinking. There's a quote from the Vietnamese Zen Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, and he speaks of this idea of interbeing, which is another concept of oneness. So he says, "Interbeing is the understanding that nothing exists separately from anything else. We are all interconnected. By taking care of one another, you take care of yourself. By taking care of yourself, you take care of the other person. Happiness and safety are not individual matters. If you suffer, I suffer. If you are not safe, I am not safe. There is no way for me to be truly happy if you are suffering. If you can smile, I can smile too. The understanding of interbeing is very important. It helps us to remove the illusion of loneliness and transform the anger that comes from the feeling of separation." So that's Thich Nhat Hanh. And then I love this idea. This comes from Africa. South African Archbishop Desmond Tutu, this is a quote of his. He says, "Africans have a thing called Ubuntu. It's about the essence of being human. It's part of the gift that Africa will give the world," he said. "It embraces hospitality, caring about others, being willing to go the extra mile for the sake of another. We believe that a person is a person through other persons, that my humanity is caught up, bound up inextricably with yours. When I dehumanize you, I inexorably dehumanize myself. The solitary human being is a contradiction in terms. Therefore, you seek to work for the common good because your humanity comes into its own in community, in belonging." Mm-hmm. I
love that.
So powerful. And then there's a note about the word Ubuntu. That actual phrase means I am because we are, which is another just beautiful expression of this idea of collective oneness. So yeah, those pieces were so inspiring, but I think this was not at all something I grew up familiar with. And that's where I thought it would be interesting to jump in and talk about our own experiences of this, and whether or not this knowing, maybe in your lives there might have been a sense of knowing that there was a connection to the all, or to everything. Is it okay if I just share kind of my experience? As a child, for me, I grew up in a really loving family. I was a part of the Christian world. My dad was a musician, really involved with both Christian radio and our church music productions and all that sort of stuff. So I grew up very enmeshed in that world and very inspired by Jesus. I still feel that connection. But as a child, I was taught that I was a part of the body of Christ. So there was that sense of being a part of something bigger. It was my spiritual family, for sure. The language of brothers and sisters in Christ, that was very common to talk about. But I will say that outside of that community of Christians, if I were to consider, being a part of the larger human family, what would have been top of mind for me, the only thing really that would have made me feel a similarity to other humans, would have been this idea that, I remember memorizing the scripture from Romans that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So I would have been like, well, yeah, we're all humans, which equals we're all sinners. We all need a savior. We're all broken. We're all, we've all missed the mark. And so that would have really been the only feeling of similarity or connection to anyone outside of my Christian community. And I guess, when I think about that right now, it just feels really sad. It feels heartbreaking that I didn't have the ability to find beauty in being connected to other human beings. It was really more fear. It was really more concern. It was genuine, loving concern. Like, oh God, I need them to know the truth so that they're safe. I mean, that was really my lifelong concern. Of course I would, there's always the lighthearted side of like laughing at just the silliness of being human, but really in the sense of feeling one with them, I didn't have that. And in fact, if someone had said to me if someone had presented this idea, I remember we're really all one, we're all connected, I would have immediately triggered that as being New Age, and that would have brought up concern about, no. Let's be clear. We don't want to blur any doctrinal lines here. We need to make sure we separate, I'm not God and God's separate, and then we're separate, and some are right with God and some are not right with God. So that would have been like my concern there. And I know not all Christians see the world that way, but yeah, it was, so for me, and this is the main subject of my book really, is that it was a slow but beautiful journey of eventually feeling safe enough to listen to other voices outside of that, my own Christian subculture that I grew up in. And really at first, I would say I listened to those other voices really carefully because I was looking for ways that I could find connection so that I could share my faith with them. So it was even at the beginning more of an evangelistic perspective. Like, well, I definitely want to hear what they have to say about faith, because that way I'll know where to find a point of, to bring in my own perspective. But it was interesting because I think what started to happen is I would feel this sense of similarity. I remember feeling, I would listen to on NPR, one of our neighbors who I really, back then the language would have been who I had a heart for, I was feeling drawn to, and I wanted to share my faith with him, and I just loved him. And I thought, oh my gosh, he listens to NPR all the time. And it's so cool that he doesn't really like watching TV. He really likes to learn and listen to these radio shows. And so I started listening, thinking that way we can have something to talk about, right? Well, it's interesting how that happens, because I was like, oh man, I love NPR. This is great. There's so many topics on here. And there was a show called, it used to be called Speaking of Faith with Krista Tippett, and then they changed it to On Being is what it's called. And I was always fascinated by the conversations because she was always talking about meaning and what is the spiritual or religious foundation of your childhood. And that's really something I love to hear about. But before I knew it, I would be very surprised with realizing something about what that person's saying, even if they had no Christian background, something about that feels familiar. Something about it, I would have said it feels Christ-like. Wow, what they just said, that feels like Jesus. And I think what I was sensing, what I would say today, is that I was feeling the frequency of unconditional love, which I believe strongly that you can find that everywhere. If you look hard enough, I think everyone can find that place of unconditional love, even if maybe it's layered on top of, with grief and with trauma. We all know what unconditional love feels like. Yeah. And I do believe that's what Jesus carries, is this frequency of unconditional love, this truth of pure love. And so I guess for me, that's just a very summary of, in time, I came to believe that, that love can be found in many other places and voices and cultures. So for me, this is a very new, relatively speaking, a new subject. I would say over the last 10 years has become deeply meaningful for me to recognize that, wow, we think we're so separate, but truly we're not. There's so much that we all share. And for sure, I can't define it. It's not something that's super, there's lots of ways you can talk about it, but that's my experience of this idea of the one.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because, I could really feel the discomfort in how your younger self thought about people who weren't in the same belief system as you. And you're right, not every Christian doctrine or faith had that strong of a belief.
Right.
But that was where you came from. That was your subculture, right? And so thanks for sharing, because that's sometimes those parts of us are not always easy to acknowledge. Right? Because you look back and you think, wow, I'd actually thought that. But, we all have versions of ourselves that we're not proud of. And yet we have to be careful as well to not dislike those parts of us, because they were part of us. We didn't know, and it's okay. So anyway, thank you for sharing that. And I love that life brought you an opportunity and has brought you many more to see that there is so many things that we do have in common.
Yeah, absolutely.
With people who can be so different than us, and so, that's really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Yeah.
When you were speaking, I was thinking about, we grew up in the very same subculture, but within that subculture is divisions. And I was a part of that subculture that was very divided out. I was a part of the denominations that didn't believe the basic Bible fundamental. I don't want to go into all this right now. I'm not trying to be
interesting, I think.
Secretive or whatever, but just so we were, had books written against us, and there wasn't a podcast back then, but lots of radio shows that talked about, what we were doing. We were people that believed in healing. We were people that believed in some of the more spiritual things, and so I never really even felt the oneness in my subculture. I felt divided there, where I had to stand for what I believed in and stand against people who
stand against other Christians, basically.
Yeah, people who had most of the same belief systems I did. So I realized I even had a whole different experience than you within the same subculture. And then as I continued my spiritual journey, one of the first ways I found oneness is just realizing I get to love nature, and I get to love earth, and I've just always been drawn to trees and herbs and mountains and ocean, and they fill me with so much life. And then realizing that I'm a part of all those cycles, and then my heart started changing towards animals. It was nothing. I never really. They were cute, and I was little. I always wanted one, but I didn't have much feeling towards them. And then my heart opened up to them, and then I was like, I just want to spend the rest of my life loving plants, animals, and earth, because I'm so connected. And then my heart said, well, yeah, but you can try and take care of them for the rest of your life, but if you don't love humans and be a part of humanity, you're gonna be a drop in a bucket. So it's like, oh yeah, humans too. So then my heart had to open up to becoming one and realizing I am also a part of the human race. So it is a journey, and it's just interesting.
I love that.
The journeys we go on, but yeah, and this is a interesting, hard topic. It's even pondering this last week or so. It's like it's not easy to wrap your head around. It's not ingrained in us at all. It's definitely something you have to stop and ponder and meditate on and think about and listen to others and really think about these quotes and things like that. And
so true.
Yeah, because, even as I hear both of you speaking, it's like this question kept popping up into my mind, and as I'm thinking about your listeners as well, it's this question of like, we love the idea, right, that we are accepting of all and we are part of the one. And yet it's like, how does one begin to cultivate that? And I know that's a whole nother topic on its own, but I think just being able to hear from the both of you in regards to, for you, Sarah, it was just over time, wanting to connect with other people who were different in how they thought than you did, and listening to information that got you thinking, wow, there's a whole nother world here that maybe is safe. Let's explore it. Right? And of course, there's so much more to tell about that. That's just an intro. And then for you just discovered this beautiful connection with nature and animals, and it just opened up something for you. So that was helpful for me to hear that, because I think often, we may not take those moments in our life and recognize, oh yeah, that was a moment, or that was a period of time where I really began to shift my perspective and to see that, wow, you know what? I am not alone. I am not separate. I really do have a connection with more than I realized.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Yeah.
I one of the things in preparing for this, I was doing a little research about, why is it so foreign for people in our culture, in America particularly, to embrace this idea of oneness? Or, it's just not something we typically discuss or talk about in our culture. And so really, as Americans, this idea that we have grown up with really is, America was built on the idea of the autonomous individual. So much about our culture, America began, by developing independence from England and separating off. And so we're basically taught you're responsible for yourself, your success is your own, your freedom depends on independence, your identity is something you construct alone. So this idea of connection to something bigger than you is kind of more of an additional thing that maybe you'll add to your life if you want to it later. Really, because everything, even about our economic system, is completely shaped by capitalism, competition, productivity, private ownership. All of those systems really do require these clear boundaries between people, and measuring your own individual contribution and separating what's mine from what's yours. It's not, think about how much fear is brought up in America when you think of communism. Communists are the ones that share everything. And man, how scary to be in a communist country, because you're controlled and your individualism just disappears. You're just one of the many people, And yet you can see these little ideas of like, well, wait, what about democratic socialism? That's being talked about more now. And so it's fascinating because it's a real big tension point in our culture, this idea of no, individual, I'm separate. And then historically speaking, this is very different in America than it is in Europe, for example, or in many other places. I would say that many other cultures they form their identity through the land, through their ancestors, through having this long memory of this stable community in one place for many generations. Whereas in our culture, we're disconnected from place, we're highly mobile, we're often living far from our extended families. So really our sense of self has nothing to do whatsoever with where we live or with the sense of rootedness. And, I guess there's different ways you can look at that. I know that you could look at in European culture, sometimes they can be very frustrated with how stuck everything is because it's so rooted to the old way that they often feel like, yeah, but we can't make any change, or you can't innovate very easily. So it's not all bad or good. It's just interesting to observe it.
Maybe finding the balance.
Yeah.
Versus one way or the other.
Right. But it's fascinating because really in America, we're so far on the side of individualism that we don't have this idea of a collective whole, really. I mean, it's not something people, because really we feel suspicious of anything that would limit that personal freedom. And I guess, that's not necessarily bad. We don't want to be controlled, obviously. Right. And really the idea of oneness really does not have to have anything to do with control. It doesn't. It just
is.
Right. It's like this. So I guess it's not that Americans are uniquely disconnected. It's that we were taught a story where separation was so necessary to the idea of freedom and what it means to succeed. So there's that we're all carrying. And we live in a Judeo-Christian culture. Has shaped so much of American life. Whether you come from a Christian home or not, the way that we've been taught to see the world is that human beings are separate from creation, and that the earth is something to steward and have dominion over. It's what the scriptures taught us. Definitely the earth was not something to belong to. That was not a part of that tradition. There's definitely these, like I mentioned already, this strong line between the sacred and the secular, and the saved and the lost, and the world. There's so many scriptures that talk about the world, quote unquote, being dangerous or fallen, or just, this is temporary. We're going to be in heaven one day, or there'll be a new heaven and a new earth. So, again, that's not all of Christianity. There are, messages of oneness within Christianity. I guess it's just more focused on the body of Christ in that way. So really, with all of that said, it's no wonder that it's a challenging concept to us. Where I think if you were to interview someone in, Thailand, or someone in South Africa, or someone in these other places, of course, South Africa has gone through a ton of separation, but in the indigenous roots, probably of anywhere, for sure, if you go back to the indigenous roots of anywhere, you would find this connection to the whole, connection to having this idea that all is sacred, and somehow we're woven into that. And I do think that we're in a time right now where people are really experiencing a hunger for that sense of connection that they know they're missing, but they can't necessarily name. I think for me, it started with meeting people who had a perspective that I had never heard before. So one of my dear friends, Bryn, has always been very, very connected to nature, and watching the way that she interacted with plants and trees, and her reverence for all of life. And really, I saw that she did not elevate humans any higher than literally like the weeds in her yard. We would have called them weeds, the plants, the wild plants, the wildlife. I mean, she made very big decisions about their impact on the land that they were living on based on the well-being of the birds that migrate through there. I mean, it was so inspiring. And then, she introduced me, and other friends introduced me to different authors and speakers. And one person that was very impactful for me was Charles Eisenstein. He wrote a book called The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. And in that book, he talks about this idea that our whole culture is steeped in the story of separation. And whether you have this religious background, or whether you have a scientific materialism background, there is this strong sense of separation and need to control outcomes, whether it's, these ones are the bad guys, let's control how we handle it. Or like in science, like we have germs, we got to figure out how to control the germs, or we got to control the weeds so that we can do the thing we need to do. And there's this total disconnect from the ideas that Thich Nhat Hanh brought up, or that idea of Ubuntu in Africa, which is this knowing that whatever I do to the world or to another person, I'm doing to myself. It's going to affect me. And his book, one of the things he talks a lot about is he's a speaker and philosopher, and he shares these ideas a lot. And one thing that's been the most impactful for me that he talks about is asking the question, what is it like to be you? And how that begins to give you an open door into seeing from another person's perspective. But coming back to this idea of oneness, another really inspiring person to me is Robin Wall Kimmerer. She wrote the book Braiding Sweetgrass. And she shares her experience as a botanist who's also raised in an indigenous culture. So her language of understanding from her childhood what it feels like to be known by the earth, by land, having this intimacy with plants and food and the wild in a way that she knew it was her family. That's the way her indigenous culture always spoke of it. And then also just having for her modeled this example of offering something, always offering back to the earth instead of just being in this relationship of taking. Having these perspectives for a little girl raised in the church. I grew up in one of the most beautiful places in the country. Grew up with redwood trees outside my back door, 10 minutes from the ocean, surrounded by natural beauty, just totally surrounded. And when I read Robin's book, I just felt this enormous sense of grief that although I'd grown up around such beauty, around such incredible nature, I was so afraid of loving it too much or of being too, because I was surrounded by, quote, hippie culture. I was surrounded by people that loved nature, and that was viewed by my subculture as like those were people that were worshiping creation instead of the creator. So it was always sort of like, this is the beautiful world that God made for us. It was never, I belong to this earth, I'm a part of this beautiful creation that surrounds me. So that was my perspective, and I think it just brought so much grief to read what I missed out on, I guess. And then also maybe I would probably say, and though I wouldn't want to stay there, I definitely felt a lot of shame. It's like, how could I have lived all this time taking, and like viewing the world as something to consume and never think to offer something in return. Like to me, this is what all indigenous cultures teach us, is that we're obligated to give back because, the earth, all of these, native cultures recognize the earth as our mother. There's nothing everything is being given freely to us. And we're all mothers here. It's not like we look at our kids with a sense of, you know what? I mean, sometimes we do. Sometimes we're like, I'm really sick of being taken advantage of. But there's that ever-giving love where you recognize and you give and you give and you give. But I don't want to be that way on the earth. I don't want to be someone who just takes and never offers back. I want to learn from these beautiful practices of recognizing what it means to live in reciprocity with the earth. And truly, all of us, if we go back far enough, we all have indigenous roots. Right. So it's not that there are different people. It's just in America, for example, the native population has been so massacred and subjugated and suppressed and completely ignored. But yet they still have intact a wisdom that we've lost. And so much of us, I think we're hungry for that.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't know if you feel that, as well, just that desire of connection to roots, to,
Yeah, definitely.
Should I bring up these different ways of belonging. What do you think?
I think so.
Or is there anything you wanted to share, Cindy? Okay. Another book that I really love that I discovered a while back is a book by Toko-Pa Turner called Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home. I stumbled upon one of the quotes on Instagram of hers, and I had to get her book, and it's been really impactful. But in the beginning of her book, she talks about how there are many different kinds of belonging, and I'll just list the ones she references. It's usually the first thing that we think of is belonging to a community or a geography. We long to belong with our own family. We look for belonging with an intimate other in relationship. Most of us yearn to feel a sense of purpose or through vocation. Then there's the spiritual longing for many of us to belong to a set of ways or traditions. There's a longing to know and participate in ancestral knowledge. And then she says, we may not even notice, but there's an ache to belong in our own bodies. There's an ache to belong and to create our own story. And then belonging with the earth itself. And then she says at the end there, finally, the great belonging, which may be the most nebulous and persistent of all, the longing to belong to that, quote, something greater, which gives our lives meaning. So I think that largest one is kind of what we're discussing here about this idea of the one. But each one of those pieces, I feel, for me, I write about that in my book as well, is discovering my ancestral connection that I had forgotten. That, wait a second, I dug up my front lawn to grow food, and all of a sudden it was like, wait a second, I'm half Italian. Where are all my ancestors? I need them. I don't know how to do this. I want to grow food, and I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And that experience just opened up this powerful experience of connection to my ancestors and to what I carry uniquely in my body as someone who's half Italian by heritage, and also, I have some English and Irish and other parts of me. Maybe not English and Scottish. My dad's gonna be mad. He always feels like, hey, your Italian side, but what about my side? What about you? Anything in that list? Did that spark any thoughts?
Well, it sparked for me, I realized that a lot of those I had at some point or have now, but it was awareness that led me to the bigger one that you talked about, the end, being realizing I'm a part of something bigger. It was just beginning to have awareness that I was connected to these things, to family, to community, to my body, to nature. And that awareness led me to a greater and greater understanding of how we're connected, and starting to see it in science, and see it in quotes, and see it in indigenous practices. And so that awareness really is what helped me understand, to an extent, oneness. It's vast, it's hard to get your mind around, but it's really what led me on this journey. And in that awareness and opening up to it, I really felt that it opened my heart to love. So the more aware I became, the more I opened myself up to understanding my connection to everything, the more I loved and was able to love. And like I said, probably the last one where I really had to open my heart up wide was humans, because you see what they do. You see what they do to the animals and the earth and our communities and all of this. And so it's harder, but when it's like, I can't get away from it. I am connected. I am one. And so just coming into that awareness, opening my heart, it just fills with that unconditional love you were talking about. And so it's definitely, even though it's hard to wrap your mind around, and it's been kind of thrown around as jokes and very sarcastic ways, if you truly sit with it, it changes you. And then if we change, we can start changing what's going on around us that is so painful.
It's really true.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you. Yeah, ladies, I have to say that just listening to this conversation about belonging causes me to just reflect on that word, obviously, and how that idea and the desire and the need to belong is so important And also it can be such a source of pain for a lot of people. So a story that is coming up to mind right now is a personal story. And I'll try to keep it short. Just give you guys the highlights. So I grew up here in Colorado and was born in Seoul, Korea. Lived there until I was 4. My mother is full Korean. My father is Scottish and Slavic. And I was raised with this notion that I need to fit in. And so there wasn't much talk about my heritage on either side of the family, and nor did I grow up with any sort of like extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents. And so it was just my parents and my sister and I, who's 4 years younger. So as I reflect back on my childhood and this idea or word of belonging, what came to mind for me was how, gosh, I spent most of my childhood with this like secret in my heart that I don't belong. Wow. And yet it felt so vulnerable to feel this because I was a kid, right? And it's hard to describe that feeling. It really is hard to describe, other than just given my personality and who I am, I knew that it would be too scary to show, let alone share. So I spent most of my childhood pretending like I did belong, even though deeply I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And I don't blame my parents, you know. And also, I do wish for any parents out there, which I think it's so different now than it was when I was growing up back in the 70s and early 80s. You know, I think there's a lot more acceptance around diversity now than there was then. And I lived in a very small community. Plus, my mother was the first person to immigrate here from her country.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And they were like 22 years old.
Yeah.
And she couldn't speak English, right? So anyway, there was a lot there. So I recently read this book called Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. And it was suggested to me by my son. He's like, hey, I wonder if it would be interesting to read like a book on Korean historical fiction. And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. So I find this book, and it takes place in the early 1900s. And it's a beautiful storyline. But one of the main things I got from this book was this idea of displacement and not belonging. Yeah. So I learned a lot about the time in history in the early 1900s when the Japanese were invading the Korean country and what it felt like to be Korean during that time. Wow. And a lot of Koreans moved to Japan. So as I was wrestling with this idea of belonging and acknowledging the truth of how I didn't feel like I belonged as a kid and how painful that was, I recognized as well that it's also not just my upbringing, but there's a connection to my lineage. Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of not only displacement with Koreans, but there was a lot of shame put on them. In the story that I read, there were several Koreans who didn't even admit that they were Korean because it was too... they would become ostracized.
Yeah, it was dangerous.
It was dangerous, but mostly they were just shamed and ostracized and belittled. And so they would say they're Japanese. Wow. Yeah, goodness. Which I'm just going to share. So Sarah knows this story, but this kind of brings it full circle. So I had a boyfriend in high school my freshman year. And so I'm a freshman at this point in time. I'm still like, who the fuck am I?
Yeah, totally.
I'm definitely not Korean, I don't think, right? Okay, so I'm dating this guy, really like him, and I tell him I'm half Italian. And so it's funny that
So funny.
I'm sitting here across from you, who is half Italian,
I know,
and
but I don't look it,
you're
really.
blonde,
I know,
right?
I don't
And-
look it. I have Northern Italian
But
heritage.
in my mind's eye back then, you know,
Yeah.
I pictured Italian women looking like I did, you know, just long dark hair.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I laugh now, but back then it was really hard because he found out I lied
Mm.
and was like, who is this crazy, wacky woman,
Aw.
you know? And I mean, that was the story I told myself. But, you know, that just goes to show, you know, how I had to protect myself.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think this idea and this truth of belonging, and this quote that you just read about the different ways that we find belonging, and through, you know, our jobs and our families and our ancestors and the earth, and belonging to all, has been a journey for me. And I agree, Andrea, just having that awareness, like, we can find all the places in our life and the path our life has taken where, yeah, you know, I did belong there. And sometimes we can't feel it, or we can't see it,
Right.
because of
Yeah.
whatever, the traumas, the stories, the myriad of things. And so, yeah, I think just to recognize, like, wow, when we can stop telling those stories to ourselves and just really begin to accept, like do the work, do the inner work, and start to just say, I'm gonna fucking love myself, and it might be hard to go there, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it, you know, because you know, I have 2 grown children in their 20s, and we just got back from Korea. We just took a family trip
So powerful.
and saw all of our relatives and family, and my kids love being Korean. In fact, they're so proud,
Yeah.
you
it's
know,
beautiful.
and so, yeah, it's all come full circle. I'm still wrestling with this idea of the one.
Mm-hmm.
I've had glimpses of it. I've had experiences of it. I think my mind gets in the way, and I make it bigger than it really is.
Yeah.
And so just learning to just, like, keep it simple.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I like that question that you posed from Charles Eisenstein with regard to perhaps changing your perspective with asking the question when you're across from another person and saying, what's it like to be you?
Yeah.
Like, genuinely,
Yeah.
not like with any kind of, like, agenda.
You are so good at that.
Yeah.
You are so good at being curious and asking questions and drawing people out. But thank you so much for sharing that powerful story. That was so
you're
beautiful.
welcome.
That's amazing.
I was thinking about, as you were talking, how we're all carrying this longing and this ache to belong to something bigger. And I think it's manifested in so many different ways, just like that list. Like, there's so many different ways that we long to belong to something else. It's like we carry that equal need. This is the one and other. We carry the equal need to be distinct and separate and individual and express who we are, and to belong to something. People say it differently. I know Glennon Doyle talks a lot on her podcast about we all want to be held and free. So it's that same idea. That's the same idea, one and other. And for me this week, even as we were pondering this, or trying to, and preparing to talk about it, it's this idea of being all one is so, it's like she says in the book, it's very nebulous. And so it's hard to quantify. It's not something we can explain or define or be exact about. But particularly if we're in a space of feeling unsafe, like you were expressing, like just that fear of, oh, will I be accepted though if they know who I am? This week for me, I mean, we've been dealing with persistent health challenges for one of my kids, and it's been really scary. And so I noticed how if I am focused on this scary situation in my family and how do I keep my kids safe, and what is my role, and can I be a good mom, and can I show up for her? Trying to talk about oneness, completely impossible. It's like you can't do both. Like if you're in that state of survival mode, of fight, flight, how in the world can you pause and lean back into the awareness that we're actually all one? Like you really can't. And I think, isn't that such a good description of what we're seeing in the world right now?
Yes.
Isn't it exactly what's happening? Like everyone, if we, I mean, it's, how do you not feel unsafe? How do you not feel terrified when you look at what's happening in the world to, with violence and othering and, blaming and the toxic messages of division that we're seeing and we're being inundated with? It puts us in that constant chronic state of fight or flight. And I guess, for me, even to try and come to a place where I could get my brain around, like, yeah, what is this about? Why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about this being one? I really had to consciously get quiet and consciously come back into my body. Some of the practices I've been doing in the evening is getting by myself, sometimes going outside where it's dark and where I'm alone, and just I'll shake, I'll jump up and down, if no one's around and I feel safe enough to do it, I'll just like make these weird sounds like, oh, or I'll just like make loud noises, or I'll like open my mouth and make my face all crazy and express how it feels inside on the outside. Doing those kind of things, I've learned like there's all these beautiful somatic practices that help you discharge stress, just like an animal will shake after they've been chased. It's like when we do that, we're mammals too. Like we need an expression. We no longer get to sit around a campfire with our tribe and dance and cry and scream and wail and whatever perhaps we once knew how to do.
Right.
We've forgotten that we need to do that. Sometimes, journaling for me is a huge way that I can express. And Nicole Sachs is a researcher who talks about how if we carry so much intense and painful emotions to the point where our body, it feels like it's too much, our body will choose a physical symptom because that feels less dangerous than those emotions that have stacked up. So sometimes people can exhibit pain. I do. I find myself having quirky pain in my body. Her teaching is to journal in such a way that is raw and honest, something you'll never keep, something you immediately burn or delete on your computer. But sometimes just getting out the most dark, awful, angry, violent thoughts, emotions, sometimes just letting that out reduces that level of emotional overwhelm to where truly your physical symptoms go away. I have experienced that. So, there's tools, and I'm not saying that these are the answers, but I do think that having some tools to and even just recognizing like when our jaw is clenched, when our breathing is shallow, when we can't sleep, or we're dealing with food doesn't digest well. Like all of these are our body's way of showing us you're trying to survive. You don't feel safe. And I think it's a little too much to ask for the world to just love each other and remember that we're all one if we personally are not able to calm our nervous systems and find tools to come back to a place of safety. And
I am really glad that you brought that up, Sarah, because I think that is a very practical way that we can all consider to take personal responsibility for what our actions is to, or what our response can be to something that feels like a threat. Because you're right, when we are in survival, that's really what our bodies are going to do. And it's difficult to stay open.
Yes.
And to hear things and to feel some relaxation in your body so you can access a part of you that is more loving or understanding. And so, that's a good one. That's so practical and it's doable, like you said. It just takes a few minutes to find something that can work for you, that you can just get some of those things out.
Yeah, and if it's not, if spirituality, this idea of spiritual oneness feels way too big, that's okay. Like, come back to the place, if you can get your body to a place of safety, and then remember, okay, but who do I belong to? Okay, maybe I can say I belong to my partner. We've committed to each other. Or, I belong to my family. The more you can get a little bit wider and wider and wider, okay, I belong to my community at my workplace or at my church or at whatever it is. It's like, ultimately the world needs more people, I believe, who can see the violence in the world and not make those people the bad guys. And that's coming back to Jesus, that's Christ consciousness. That's unconditional love. If we can look at the people that we are most horrified by, like right now, looking at these ICE agents and the harm that they are causing, I want to make them the bad guy. I want to be like, that's it. That's the problem. We got to abolish ICE. And yet there's something deep in me that knows if I wear a t-shirt that says fuck ICE, guess what I'm doing? I am inflaming the anger of those who feel that no, America needs law and order and the ICE agents are just enforcing what we need for America to be safe. There is nothing that is going to do if I get out there enraged and use a violent language even, I would say. I mean, I get it. I want to say it. I feel it.
Yeah.
I feel it. But I think that, and again, this is, probably be criticized for this, but it's like, there is a big reason why Jesus and the message of Christ has continued to go on. It's because he said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. That's Christ consciousness. To allow yourself to be violently harmed, to not even cling to your own life, to say, you know what? Go ahead. Arrest me. Kill me. I still love you. I can hold that. I can hold that kind of love. I don't know that there's very many people in the world that are capable of that, but that's where that question from Charles feels so powerful, because if I can look at an ICE agent and say, what's it like to be you? Right. You took that job. Why did you take that job? Maybe because you needed the money. Maybe because it felt really good to you to feel like, well, finally someone's recognizing my strength and my courage. I'll go out there. I'll round up these illegals or whatever. It's like that person, that ICE agent is a person who was once a baby, cherished and loved by, hopefully, by their parents. And all of us were once in our mother's wombs. All of us were once in that place of innocence. And we are one. That's just what I'm going to say. We are one. And I don't understand it, but I feel it in my body. I feel the truth of it. And I think that's the space I want to hold with this podcast, even without having the answers, even without being able to articulate an argument about it. It's that we are both one and we're other. And as we jump into that topic about our uniqueness and our distinction, I think always remembering that we're distinct on purpose so that we can contribute to the whole, so that we can be filling in the gaps where someone else may not have a strength, where someone else can fill the place where we have shadow and we don't see. So yeah, I don't know. It's a crazy time to be alive. Thank you so much for offering your stories. I just love you both so much. And I'm so grateful that you are here giving me courage to do something scary. May we all continue to recognize our beauty and our difference. And may we also reach in whatever way we can toward the idea that we're all one and we're all connected.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, friends. Thanks to those of you who hung in there through the scratchy audio. Before you go, I'd love to leave you with a song that illustrates this topic so beautifully. The song is called One by the band Birdtalker, and we will link it in the show notes. If you're enjoying the conversation and curious to follow along, please like, share, and subscribe to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Until next time, take care, friends.